Now entering Nerdist.com.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, Episode 13, The Conscience of the King.
Good morrow, listeners, and welcome to an episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, sure to set your teeth on edge. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm John Champion. Once more into the breach, dear friends. We hold up an episode of Star Trek to see if the morals and the messages make neither rhyme nor reason.
This is the short and the long of it, but why this week with the heavy use of the Bard's own words? Well, the play is the thing that leads Captain Kirk to bring a mass murderer to justice in this week's episode, The Conscience of the King.
Now, before we get going, if you've not slept one wink, because you just have to let us know your thoughts about the show, you can contact us in a number of ways. You can email us at missionlog@roddenberry.com, tweet us at missionlogpod, or find us at facebook.com/missionlogpod. You can even leave us a voicemail at missionlogpod on Skype, or call 323-522-5641. In one fell swoop, we'll have your comments, and we may even use them on a future episode.
I know not of this voicemail of which you speaketh. We got to stop that, right? We're going to stop that now?
No, we're not, because throughout this episode, I have scattered phrases of Shakespeare.
You did that.
I did that. And so if you are paying attention as a listener, you will hear these little bits and pieces. Some of them are just painfully obvious, like our entire opening.
Yeah. You won't hear those from me, by the way. You will catch a lot of 70s and 80s music references from me.
Okay.
None of which I believe were written by the Bard.
By Shakespeare? No?
Yeah,
okay.
No, I don't believe so.
Well, tonight's episode is The Conscience of the King, and the focus is on a group of actors on the Enterprise, and it plays out as sort of a murder mystery episode. But as good luck would have it, we have time now for some trivia. I will be quick about it, because brevity is the soul of wit.
Hey, I see what you did there.
Okay, so the show is from Shakespeare, and so is just everything in the show. The title, the play within the play, leaning heavily on MacBeth, but then you have the actors performing a bit of Hamlet at the end. So it's just Shakespeare everywhere. And why not? You know, I mean, I like to say that Star Trek is a slice of pop culture literature that holds up over time. That's the whole purpose of our show, Ken. See if it holds up over time. And what holds up better over time than Shakespeare? So when you have a merging of the two, I think that's a great thing. We learned something really interesting about Kirk here. You know, Kirk is the, and big finger quotes, the all-American hero, although he borrows a lot from the Greek tradition, but that is kind of the figure of Kirk. But we learn here that he was raised at least partially on another planet about 20 years prior. We're not totally sure how old that would make him, because he's old enough to have been aware of what was going on, but young enough that he sort of put this behind him. Right. And I find that kind of strange as a character thing, but we will get into that with the discussion of the show. This is the last filmed sequence for Grace Lee Whitney. And in our previous episodes, we talked about that kind of process there where she finished up her episodes. She actually knew that she had been let go from the show at this point, and then went in to film her last little bit on this episode.
And it's wonderful.
It
really is just a fantastic moment.
We have the lovely young ingenue Lenore invited to the bridge by Kirk, and it's just a glance. It's just a look.
It is not just a glance. It is a look.
It is.
It is not just a glance, though. So much is spoken in the 4 seconds, maybe, that she's on screen.
Yep.
That you could even, I mean, if you wanted to do, and I know I'm retconning, I know, and you've taught me that term, and I appreciate it. I think there was supposed to be a romance developing between Kirk and Rand. And there is so much said by Rand when this young woman comes on the bridge, this young woman that obviously has the attention of Captain Kirk. And you could say it's so much that's said by Rand, or you could say it's so much that's said by Grace Lee Whitney. Oh,
right.
So we're going to go that way? We're going to ditch the chick on the Enterprise and just roll in a new woman every week? Says
Apparently
the
we
look from
are.
Grace Lee Whitney. Or, oh, sure, you're just some girl on a planet. I'm here day in, day out, says Yeoman Rand. Either way, and all this is without words. And, of course, we're putting a whole lot into it, but I loved it. I was like, wow. I mean, here's what I heard. I know no words were spoken, but here's what I heard when she gave Lenore the look.
Mm-hmm. I heard the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes. So on to happier things, though. This is the first episode where Majel Barrett is doing the voice of the computer. And, that is such an indelible part of Star Trek that it is kind of odd that we haven't had it up until now. We have had computer voices before, but now we have Majel Barrett, soon to be Majel Barrett Roddenberry, doing the voice of the computer.
Hey, I have a bit of trivia. I'm no Majel Barrett Roddenberry. Do they think I don't know that? Sorry. It's not you. It's me. Maybe we should just go ahead to the episode recap.
Captain Kirk is in a theater watching Macbeth when his friend points out that he thinks the lead actor is really Kodos, the executioner. Act 1. The Enterprise has been diverted at the request of Dr. Thomas Layton to investigate a famine-ending food product. Oops, that's not entirely true. Layton has lied to get his old friend Kirk to come by to corroborate his suspicion that the Shakespearean actor Anton Caridian is actually the despot Kodos, who killed half the population of Tarsus IV some 20 years ago. Kirk explains that Kodos is dead. He returns to the Enterprise, though, to do a Google search. He asks the Enterprise computer to compare Kodos and Caridian. They're a little similar, but it's too hard to tell. Kodos is officially reported dead, but the body wasn't positively identified. Kirk decides to go back to the planet where he meets Caridian's lovely 19-year-old daughter, Lenore. There's a little flirtation and then a moonlit walk interrupted by the discovery of Layton as dead as a doornail. Kirk needs time to investigate. He calls in a favor to the captain of the Astral Queen, and now the actors are stranded with the Enterprise the only ship in town. Lenore asks for a ride and promises a Shakespeare performance for the crew. Act 2. Kirk is searching the library computer and realizes he and Layton are among the 9 eyewitnesses of Kodos' reign of terror. Know who else was an eyewitness? Riley, the one who sings Irish drinking songs in The Naked Time. Kirk wants Riley out of view just in case and sends him to engineering. Spock is getting suspicious too, and he turns to McCoy about the captain's odd behavior. Meanwhile, the only behavior Kirk is really overplaying here is to lay on the seduction with Lenore as a couple of star-crossed lovers in the hangar deck. Riley, and I swear he's on the verge here of breaking into song at any minute, radios up to Uhura, who is persuaded into a tune. He's about to have dinner, very healthy, milk and brightly colored cubes of food, when someone poisons his drink. Riley falls over choking, but Uhura realizes things are not right, and Riley is whisked away to sickbay. Spock is now putting things together. If Riley and Kirk are the only remaining Kodos witnesses, Kirk must be the next target. Act 3. McCoy and Spock have had just about enough of Kirk's ambiguity and decide to get to the bottom of things. Kirk is all, "I'm not sure," and Spock is all, "Come on, you have eyes." Then they're both all, "What's that noise?" "Oh, it's a phaser set to overload." The captain searches everywhere for the phaser, finally discovers it behind an alert panel, and then rushes into the hall to eject it in the mini disposal chute. Kirk then goes directly to Caridian. What follows is, well, it's a lot of dramatic doublespeak and vague allusions to past lives, and maybe I am, maybe I'm not, but what does it matter now? Kirk has Caridian do a voice recording, just in case a library computer can compare that to a known recording of Kodos. Riley is awake now after his close brush with death, and McCoy is in the next room recording a personal log about Caridian/Kodos. This is all Riley needs to hear. He's certain that the attempt on his life was related to the devil incarnate who wiped out his own family. Act 4. Kirk is still indecisive, even though the computer says that the voice analysis is very close. Riley has decided that Caridian is Kodos, and he grabs a phaser to give the devil his due at some point during the troupe's performance. Kirk catches Riley sneaking around backstage and stops him. Caridian overhears this, and he explains his distress to Lenore. Lenore, much to his surprise, knows all about it. She's so cool with it, in fact, that she's been going around killing anyone who is an eyewitness. Caridian is devastated that the past has been dredged up, that there is more bloodshed, and most of all, that his seemingly innocent daughter has been drawn into his own terrible deeds. Lenore quickly grabs a phaser from a guard and runs on stage. Displaying exactly what madness lies, she points her weapon at Kirk, but Caridian jumps in front. She shoots her own father, and now we've got some pretty heavy soliloquizing. All's well that ends well? Well, maybe not. Later on the bridge, McCoy reports that Lenore is being cared for, but is so far gone that she thinks her father is still alive and performing. When pushed by McCoy, Kirk vaguely indicates that he had feelings for her, but after all, discretion is the better part of valor. I think you want to ask the obvious question here about Kirk.
What? You mean, is he doing what Spock did last week?
I think he's doing exactly what Spock did last week. He basically hijacks the Enterprise, changes course, and he's going off on a personal mission.
Well, yes and no. I mean, what Spock did last week was hijack the Enterprise. Oh, by the way, he's not the captain.
True.
And go someplace that he could get killed for going to take one guy to live happily ever after. I mean, Kirk, on the other hand, is, though personally involved, as theoretically in pursuit of justice.
Yeah, but would it kill him to make sure that his plans are known to his highest and most trusted advisors?
I don't know. Maybe. It nearly killed Caridian / Kodos. It eventually did, but once somebody else found out, once Riley overheard, then he nearly kills Kodos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So would it have killed Kirk? Who knows? Because you've obviously got somebody going around killing people, and Kirk is on that list.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, and maybe we're jumping the timeline again. I keep thinking about the protection that is placed on the captain in a show like Next Gen. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like here is the captain willingly endangering himself and potentially other people on the ship. He doesn't know if all of this killing will just end with him. He doesn't know how dangerous the situation is,
right?
Except that his friend Tom is now dead, too. So... I don't know. To me, it's a pretty close parallel to what happened with Spock.
Well, similar, but not the same. I don't think for this Kirk should be drummed out of Starfleet. Going back to the menagerie, right. Spock should be drummed out of Starfleet for what he did. Now, of course, that would be bad, and we don't really think that. But we kind of do. In a military organization, Spock would probably be drummed out.
Oh, yeah.
Kirk, I think, would get a reprimand. But I don't think he would be relieved of duty for a couple of reasons. First of all, again, he is captain of the ship. That does give him a certain amount of, I don't want to say privilege. It's not like he can just, treat it like a yacht. But, it gives him a certain amount of leeway being captain of the ship. And then he's actually doing something. I think the Federation would probably be happy to see Kodos, brought up on charges or detained or however you want to do it. Maybe they want to send him to Tantalus.
There you go.
I don't know what they would do with him, but I don't think, Kirk's not just out, giving somebody a ride. He's in pursuit of something that I think most people in the Federation would say was probably a good thing.
I still think he's going rogue because here we are at the question of, do the ends justify the means? Same thing with Kirk, same thing with Kodos, and we'll get more into kind of those motivations in a moment. But Kirk he's acting a little inappropriately. I kept thinking to myself, what do his personal logs sound like during all of this?
Well, that's a good point, but we're not privy to those.
We're not. But I keep thinking he's saying things like, I'm not going to tell anybody what I'm doing here, but I'm totally going to seduce this 19-year-old girl so I can find out if Kodos / Caridian are the same man.
Yeah.
So
you've got a problem with the age thing.
Well, I do. Yeah, I do a bit, because here's the thing. We have to assume that Kirk was 20 years ago of age enough to be aware what was going on.
Yep.
And I'm going to say that Kirk is mid-30s. We haven't had, up to this point, we have not had a canon description of how old Kirk is. Yeah. That'll come. I know that'll come. But I'm going to say mid-30s, but maybe could be a little bit older, because we have to assume that he was a young adult, at least.
Right.
Late teen, young adult, while he was on Tarsus 4.
Yes.
And Lenore, okay, she's a mature 19. I'll give her that.
Right.
But she's crazy. We get that.
Well, we don't know that yet.
Yeah, we don't know that yet, but I don't know. And here's the thing. It's like Kirk's seduction of her, if he's doing it just to get information out of her, it's wrong. If he's doing it because he's really trying to seduce this 19-year-old girl, I still think it's wrong.
Oh, dude. And here's the thing.
Uh-huh.
First of all, we've graduated from Miri.
Yeah, we have.
And that's good news.
Yep.
If she were 12, as she was in Miri, I'd be on your side on this. But, I promised earlier that I would speak in 70s and 80s song lines.
Yep, go ahead.
The Cuervo Gold, the Fine Colombian, Make Tonight a Wonderful Thing. That's from the song Hey 19 by Steely Dan. And if you go back and listen to it, this is a song about a guy who has no business talking to a 19-year-old. So you know what he's going to do? He's going to get drunk.
Right.
He's going to suggest that she get drunk, and they're going to do what drunk people, and partake in. Well, Fine Colombian could be food, but sure. I'm thinking not.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not encouraging that kind of behavior. I'm just saying, I'm just happy that she's not 13.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, that song takes place way back in 67.
No, that song does not take place way back in 67. He's talking about way back in 67 in the early 1970s. He's talking about way back in 67 to somebody who's 19, who way back in 67 would have been somewhere between, I don't know what year Hey 19 came out, but he's talking to somebody who would have seen 67 at the tender young age of 19. She would have been somewhere between 10 and maybe 13.
True. Yeah, there you go.
That's ancient history.
Yeah,
to her.
Well, I mean, and here's the thing. I know that Lenore is of age,
right?
Obviously, and like I said, she is a mature 19.
Yeah.
I still get the Kirk kind of creepy factor that we know that he's just laying on the charm to get the information out of her.
Yeah, she's an adult.
Their exchange at the cocktail party is just kind of strange.
Oh, you raise another interesting point. She's of drinking age in the Federation, too. She's an adult. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying, here's the thing. Well, whatever. I now sound like a dirty old man, and I guess I'm okay with that, because she is an adult.
Yeah, she is.
Mostly, again, I'm just happy that she's not underage.
Right.
Because, if Kirk hits on one more 13-year-old, I may have a problem.
Right.
So, and even though he's only hit on one, as far as we know, I mean, up to this point in the series, he's only hit on one. Oh, fingers crossed that it doesn't happen again.
Okay.
I got to say, I love the use of Hamlet here, but I mean, part of that is I love Hamlet.
Everybody loves Hamlet. Yeah.
Everybody doesn't like something, but nobody doesn't love Hamlet.
Right.
But I mean, no, it works well here. I mean, I know you were sort of impressed with using MacBeth in the beginning and how that overlays. The idea of a man spurred to action by horrors of the past, by ghosts, as Hamlet is in Hamlet and as Kirk is in Conscience of the King. I think Hamlet works much better than, say, Twelfth Night.
You don't think that Caridian would have looked great in purple stockings prancing around the corridors of the Enterprise?
I'm just saying. I think maybe it's
all right.
It's probably a good choice there. I do also think it's neat that Lenore's introduction to the play, saying Hamlet is a violent play of violent times when life was cheap and ambition was God. I don't know. It's not terribly accurate necessarily, since I think Hamlet would have been happy living with his mother, aunt, and father, uncle once he got over his grief. Hamlet was not about ambition for the part that we see. It was, of course, ambition that leads Claudius to kill Hamlet's father, whose name escapes me. Hamlet? Was his name Hamlet? I can't remember. Yes, here I am. I love Hamlet, but I can't remember, the name of the ghost. We'll call him Hamlet's father.
Okay. Yeah.
I loved her description of it. I mean, it's interesting. It sort of explains away some of the violence in the play, two people living in the 23rd century, although, I mean, the whole thing is steeped in violence because we know the history of Kodos as we're going into it. So, yeah, I just, nothing really there. I just loved the way Hamlet worked into the whole thing, or how the writer of this episode, worked Hamlet into the whole thing, wove it around.
I agree. And you know what? There's something interesting here about Kirk, the character of Kirk, that right at the beginning, he's completely satisfied without the positive ID of Kodos. We learn the story that Kodos is reported dead, and Kirk says, well, that's what the records say. He's dead. I'm fine with that. But then for the rest of the episode, he is very indecisive, and he's very concerned here about doing the right thing.
Well, Kirk's a Holocaust survivor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, not to make that just like, that's what it is. But I mean, Kirk's a Holocaust survivor. I mean, there were people who came out of World War II. And to me, this is actually fascinating. I don't remember if we're supposed to talk about this here or later or whatever. But to me, this is actually a fascinating episode because you watch it now and you can sort of make that, you can make that case that that's what it is. But we're watching it 50 years later.
Yeah.
Or close to. When this episode came out in 1966, we were 21 years from the end of World War II. And Kodos was last seen 20 years ago. This is actually a very timely episode for when it was produced. I'm not saying, old Nazis were turning up all over the place, but it wasn't, it wasn't impossible to think that somebody who's been living normal life as a teacher or an actor or, just, the old guy down the corner that nobody really talks to, but he's a nice guy. He's quiet. Oh, and he's a Nazi, it turns out. As far as Kirk, though, and being fine without habeas corpus, I would think he would be because of the horrors that he's seen. There were some people who came out and said, let's catch everybody and, bring them to justice or kill them or what have you. And there were other people who came out and said, I'm glad that's over.
Right.
And they were fine to have it be over. So Kirk being okay with that, it's kind of interesting to me. I don't know that Kirk was convinced. I think he was happy with the story. Kodos is dead. Good. Kodos is dead. I don't have to think about it. I think if you had put the question to, well, are you sure he's dead? I mean, he almost, with Leighton, does the whole thing with, putting his fingers in his ears and saying, nope, Kodos is dead. La, 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 la. So.
Couple more observations here before we get into the discussion. Hey, our old pal Riley is back.
I could not believe they sent him to engineering. Does nobody remember what happened the last time Riley was in engineering?
I know, it's a train wreck. Yes.
Yes. That's such a great idea. But he didn't sing, which is good.
Oh, he was right on the verge. I mean, any moment it was going to be a musical again, and it was going to be Riley.
Well, he
was just saved. He was saved by Uhura being on the other end of the intercom.
Yeah, what's going on, by the way? 400 some odd complement on this ship. They keep one guy in engineering.
Yeah, right.
Really? I mean, Riley. The reason Riley calls up is because Riley is bored, and Riley is bored because there is nobody else in engineering. First of
Apparently,
all,
Scotty doesn't even like to go to engineering.
I know.
He's nowhere to be found in this episode.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Yeah. And again, even if you want to send Riley to engineering, please, the last time he was there, things went poorly. Send someone else along with him. I mean, just, I know he's not under the effects of the contagion as he was in the Naked Time, but, just in case he gets the urge, because let's remember, he does know how to take over the Enterprise from engineering.
Yeah, from here on out, it's Riley, stay in your quarters, and we're taking out all the buttons that have any control over the ship or any connection to any.
See, that might have been a good idea. Riley, you look tired. Maybe you could go lay down for 5 to 7 days. That would have been probably the way to get Riley out of the way. Either that or send him, send him off to Rigel.
Yeah, there you go. And you know what? If Riley were looking for a way to get to Rigel, he could take a shuttle, because apparently the Enterprise has a shuttle bay and a shuttle craft.
All of a sudden.
Yeah. So, of course, these were shot a little bit out of order and aired a little bit out of order. We are introduced to the idea of the shuttlecraft last week in the menagerie, but now we get to see the hangar deck, at least the observation area of the hangar deck. And you know what? The topic of the shuttle has come up a few times. You'll be able to listen to it in a supplemental episode of Mission Log. But we do finally actually have a hangar deck and a shuttle that we can call the Enterprise's own.
Right, making the whole plot point of The Enemy Within completely make no sense anymore.
Spock, by the way, Spock, he's kind of back to the tough guy enforcer role here. I love this line that he has with McCoy. McCoy is going into Kirk's quarters when they both confront him. McCoy is leading with this idea of, well, yeah, Riley was poisoned, but I'm not really sure what that means yet. And Spock just, come on. He has this great line. You should learn the difference between empiricism and stubbornness, Doctor. And Spock has made up his mind.
Yeah.
He has decided, and he's ready to just be done with all of this.
And yet he doesn't seem clear on what should happen once it happens. I mean, what he's actually more concerned about, it's almost like he doesn't give a wet slap about Kodos being there, except that Kodos may hurt Kirk.
Right.
His big concern is not making sure that Kodos comes to justice, although one assumes that he would get to that. But as second in command, his primary duty is to make sure the chain of command is not broken, and more to the point, make sure his friend Jim is not killed.
You know what we should do? When we're done with this show in 14 years, we should do a Shakespeare podcast. I'll start. Hark, hark, I hear the strain of strutting chanticleer. If you knew what I just called John and Ken, you'd be busting a gut.
I think one of the most poignant things in this episode, in terms of the meat, the morals, and the messages that we like to look for, McCoy's exchange with Kirk here about vengeance. McCoy keeps pushing Kirk to say, "What are you really after? Is this justice or is this vengeance?" And when Kirk says, basically, I'm going to see this out, I'm going to find out what's going on here, and if it's Kodos, he will be, prosecuted, killed, whatever it is that will happen to him in the 23rd century. And McCoy basically says to him, "Well, so once that happens, what do you do now? What do you solve by doing that?" And Kirk's reply is just that, well, all those people who died on Tarsus 4 get to rest a little easier. Really? But I don't know if that's a great answer.
Well, it's not. There's a great line at the beginning of Fargo. I think it was actually written on the screen either before or after, beginning or end, where they say, to protect the living, the names have been changed. To protect the dead, nothing else has been. Now, that whole thing turned out to be fake. It was something along those lines. That whole thing turned out to be fake. Fargo is not, in fact, based on a true story. That was part of the fun that the Coen brothers had when they made Fargo. But to say that, those people will be able to rest easier, I'm not sure we owe the dead anything. I mean, that's not a real answer. I mean, this is obviously for Kirk's benefit, and you could say for the benefit of justice as well. But I'm okay with Kirk's answer because I don't think Kirk knows why Kirk is doing what he's doing. I mean, I think he feels like he has to see it through somehow, but I don't think he knows whether it's justice or vengeance. And,
Well, yeah, but I think that's why it's so appropriate and so good that McCoy calls him out on it. And I think Kirk is a little shaken by that because he doesn't know. And if he doesn't know, then probably the motivations aren't entirely correct here.
Why do you assume that?
Well, I mean, the motivation to want to see justice done is correct, but meanwhile, Kirk is to me, Kirk is too close to the problem. And this goes back to my problem with Kirk sort of doing all of this on his own, not telling anybody about it, and leaving it to McCoy and Spock to just sort of figure it out and pick up the pieces. If Kirk had, and of course we wouldn't have the episode at this point, so all of this is null and void because we have to have the dramatic element of the story here. Right. But had he been able to remove himself from this and say, look, I need you, Spock, and I need you, McCoy, and I need the skills of the other people on the Enterprise who can do this to figure out who this person is, because I'm either doing something that is purely for the need for justice, or I might just be kind of off on a tear here because I'm remembering something poorly from 20 years ago.
So is your concern that Kirk was maybe going to kill Kodos?
No. I love the fact that Kirk is constantly stepping in the way and stopping that from happening. He obviously he takes the phaser away from Riley, and he is racked with indecision. But like I said, I think he is still emotionally too close to this, and that's why he's just displaying this kind of very weird behavior about making it all secret and all this, and I think that it could have been very cut and dried had he gone through maybe a little more proper channels.
The only reason I can think of that he wouldn't have done that is either he doesn't want to seem crazy because, common knowledge says that Kodos is dead, and so he doesn't want people to freak out and think, oh, he's freaking out.
Yeah.
Or maybe he was thinking about killing him. Now, I never got the sense that he was thinking about killing him on his own, although it is sort of an interesting question when Bones asks him, is this about, justice or vengeance? I mean, the only way it's about vengeance is if he's going to kill him, because we know that there's only one thing that's going to get Kodos killed. And
that's going to Talos.
That's going to Talos 4, right?
Right.
So, I mean, unless he's going to set him up to go to Talos 4, I mean, he's not going to kill him, and Kodos is not going to die for his crime. I'm not sure what the struggle was, unless he was thinking about killing him. Now, maybe it was the start. Maybe it was seeing Riley standing there with the phaser that made Kirk decide, okay, I'm not going to kill him. Although certainly, if you were going to kill him, you could have just done it in his quarters.
Sure.
I don't know. It didn't. There was nothing about what Kirk did that bothered me, honestly.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that there are admirable things about Kirk here. Like I said, the fact that he has that little element of indecision, kind of questioning himself, and the fact that he knows he has to stop Riley from killing Kodos / Caridian. And I think that's why, when I come back to it, to me, obviously this show isn't about the death penalty, but it made me think about that. And it's not a show about the role of justice. This is a show that is much more about the mystery at hand here and Kirk's doubt, which I like seeing played out. But it made me think about all of those things. And it made me think about, again, going back to McCoy's line, well, what now? What if you get what you're after? Then what happens? Is everything okay all of a sudden when if Kodos is put to death, or particularly if you kill him? And I just like this idea that we keep going back and forth with this question about justice versus vengeance. And that is very much relevant at all times. It was relevant in the distant past. It is relevant now. It will continue to be relevant in the future.
Yeah, it goes back to some of the questions that we had around Dagger of the Mind as well. What is prison supposed to be? So, I mean, if you don't want to say it's going to be prison, but what is punishment supposed to be? Well, not even punishment, though, because punishment is obviously punishment. So what is it that's going to happen to Kodos, and why is it going to happen? Is it about rehabilitating him? Is it about punishing him? Or is it just about removing him from society? I mean, the interesting thing is Kodos has already removed himself from society. Now there's this Caridian guy, and this Caridian guy just goes around, and is an actor. So, I mean, Kodos kind of is dead.
Yeah.
Except, of course, for the fact that he's not.
Right. But, okay, say they had taken Kodos and sent him away to Tantalus.
Yeah.
And used that device and wiped out his memory.
Yeah.
And now there is no memory of Kodos. As far as Kodos is concerned, there is only Caridian. Well, then we're kind of back at the same place, aren't we?
Well, I mean, the other thing, though, is that machine is toast.
It is.
So you can't really.
The plans may be floating around. We don't know. Well, let's talk about Kodos a little bit.
Okay.
Like so many of the bad guys throughout history, the real despots and tyrannous leaders. Here's somebody who thinks that what he did was right.
You're crazy. You're crazy. Go ahead.
It's not me. It's not me. I mean, he thinks that he is justified in his actions.
Dude.
No?
Dude.
You don't think so?
Do I think he was, or do I think he thinks he was?
No. I'm not saying that he was justified. I'm saying that he thinks he was. Well, so in the same way you take a horrific historic figure like Hitler.
Yeah.
Okay. Clearly, what Hitler was doing was wrong by all counts, and yet he thought that what he was doing was right for his country.
No.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I disagree.
Really?
Well, you can't tell me that. I mean, obviously Hitler thought what he was doing was right for Germany, but he was wrong. And you can't tell me that there wasn't some part of him somewhere or other people standing around saying, what he's doing is wrong. So, I mean, I don't know that what Kodos felt like he was doing good for the 4,000, but it was at the expense of the other 4,000. And who was he to decide that kind of thing? And you can't say, well, he was a leader and he made a tough decision. No, the tough decision would have been, it's the 23rd century. Something is going to happen. There are ships that bring supplies. The problem was the supplies weren't going to get there soon enough. And so he thought, well, the best thing to do is pick the 4,000 that I like and kill the other 4,000 so that there's no hardship for the 4,000 that I like while we're waiting for the supplies.
Right.
I mean, this was not a decision that needed to be made. And here's the thing, going back to what we talked about a couple of weeks ago in the Corbomite maneuver.
Yes.
We have to decide what we're going to be. We have to decide what we're going to do. It should not have to be written in bylaws that, okay, if things get tough for the 8,000, I'm going to suddenly make it 4,000. You shouldn't have to write that down ahead of time. Anybody who is the leader of an Earth colony, if we were talking about the Klingons or if we were talking about some other alien race, then you might say, well, they're a warrior-like species, aren't they? So that kind of thing happens. But we know that what happened on Tarsus 4, we know that Tarsus 4 was an Earth colony. Now, there are a couple of things. I mean, there's definitely a war thing going on, though, because in his speech where he says he's going to execute 4,000 of the people, he talks about the revolution having been won. I don't know what the revolution is. I don't know what all of that is. They're obviously setting it up as a warrior kind of thing. But here's the problem. Anybody who wins a revolution and says, but the bad news is 4,000 of you have to die, I don't think he was on the side of right. I don't know who he overthrew in this revolution. I don't know what was overthrown in this revolution. Or was he just speaking, generally about, how wonderful society is now. And we've thrown off the shackles of bad and ick. But we do still apparently have a problem with tyranny, which I'm going to prove to 4,000 of you in about 3 minutes. And also we've got the problem of famine.
Yeah.
So you've got to die so that everybody else can live. And I think we have to, just like I said a couple of weeks ago in the Corbomite maneuver, we have to decide that, no, that's not the way we're going to do it. Because what Kodo says is, if that supply ship hadn't gotten there, then I would be thought a hero today. Well, no, I don't think so. I think he would have been thought a hero if, only Nazis would think that he was a hero. Seriously. Only Nazis would think he was a hero in that case. And most everybody else would say, had he led those 8,000 people bravely through a very tough time, and had they all ended up dying, it would have been a tragedy. And he would have been seen as a strong leader who led these people through this terrible time. And it's so unfortunate that there wasn't more that could have been done. I don't think anybody would have shown up and said, oh, you know what he should have done was killed half the people.
No. I think from obviously from that perspective, nobody would think that his decision making is right. What I'm trying to say is that from the perspective of the show, anyway, we're given this sort of we're given this side of Caridian that we do like, that we do sort of try to understand. And that is this sort of Star Trek thing about, well, let's try to understand our enemy here. And we're going to paint this enemy with the worst possible thing, which is that he slaughtered half the population that he was responsible for. He's getting into this sort of self-imposed eugenics, which goes back to Dr. Corby and Dr. Adams and all this stuff, playing God with who lives and who dies. And out of those who live, then I get to pick who those people are. we're given this little shred of sympathy to feel for him. I think even just the fact that it's 20 years later and now he's an old man who is probably not as dangerous as he was 20 years ago.
You're given a little shred of sympathy. Forgive me, I don't feel it. I honestly felt more sympathy for Amon Goethe in Schindler's List. Seriously, I felt more sympathy for Goethe in Schindler's List than I felt for Caridian/Kodos. And maybe it's just because of what we see on the screen. In Schindler's List, we see Ralph Fiennes fall in love with his maid, who is Jewish, and this presents a conflict for him. I don't get the sense that Kodos had any conflict about killing the 4,000 people. He may feel bad about it ever since, but we don't know if he feels bad because he killed 4,000 people or because it's always dogged him, because he had to give up his life and be something else because he killed 4,000 people, and it turns out that was an unpopular decision. I mean, do I feel sorry for him?
Well, wait. I think that he does know that it was wrong, that what he did was wrong. I mean, that whole thing with Lenore, when we get to the end, he's saying, no more blood on my hands. And he's absolutely racked with this. He has tried so hard to put it behind him. I don't think just from the self-preservation side of it, I think that there is a guilt following him around about this. I mean, I maybe I'm reading way too much into his experience here, but I do think that we are presented with something sympathetic here. Just the fact that he has this daughter, he has this other life. We don't know until the end that the daughter's crazy too. You know,
There's that.
Yeah.
Driven mad, by what he's done and by trying to cover up for it, by the way.
Right. Yeah. But I don't think that there is a good justification for what he did. And I think by all accounts, this is horrifically wrong. That is a very clear-cut thing here. I just think that we are presented with this idea of a shred of Caridian/Kodos that is sympathetic, that is human, that at least the others around him are trying to understand before just counting him off, killing him, or doing doing whatever it is that the justice system will do with him.
Yeah, I didn't feel it.
Okay, fair enough.
Right, thanks.
All right, moving on. I think that there's this little moment here because we talk very often about technology and man versus technology and all of this, and there's this confrontation between Kirk and Caridian in Caridian's quarters, where then Caridian calls out Kirk about humanity, and he's dressing down Kirk, saying, well, look at you. You think I'm a murderer, but look at you. You have all this technology that makes you inhuman. Wait just a minute. You're the governor of an Earth colony. That means that some technology got you from Earth to another planet, first of all. And you were able to radio back, and even though you didn't get the answer that you needed about getting new supplies, it just seemed like a conversation that wasn't particularly effective. Do you follow? Do you think the same thing here? It seemed it seemed like just self-preservation.
It didn't even seem to me like to be stalling or self-preservation. It just seemed like, okay, if you want to say that Kodos does have bad feelings about what he did, and it's not just that he's been chased around, from one end of the galaxy to the other, theoretically, he's trying to bring Kirk down. Kirk obviously feels like he's got a bit of the moral high ground here, what with his, not only having not killed 4,000 people, but having survived under the rule of this despot.
Right.
And it feels like Kodos is just, trying to say, oh, you think you're so great, but you're not so great. I mean, it's like that's pretty much it. I mean, he doesn't like, somebody sitting in judgment over him. Yeah. And so he's trying to bring Kirk down to his level, although with an argument that really holds no water.
Well, let's talk about that judgment, because the next thing that happens is that Lenore then calls out Kirk for mercy. Mm-hmm. And to me, that just the gall of that moment. And to me, that's the turning point where you just have to think, okay, something is not right with this girl at all. But Kirk's retort to that is great. You know, she's painting him as this, you know, judgmental, godlike figure who gets to decide who has mercy and who doesn't. Who are you to do this? And Kirk's line, who do I have to be? I think is terrific, because that is the statement there for personal responsibility for the injustice that has happened. So it's very simple, but I thought it was a powerful line because it ends the argument. There is no good reply to that from her. You know, he's kind of taken a beating from the both of them up until that point.
Plays from 400 years ago, a TV show from 50 years ago about a time 200 years from now. What message has all of this for us today?
Well, you've got the trivia thing that you love to do. One of my favorite things to do is to ask the questions, then the show. And not because I'm looking forward to ending the show, though there is something on TV. Does this episode hold up for you? From a production standpoint, I don't even know about the whole message thing yet, so we'll get to that in a moment. But just from a production standpoint, does this episode hold up for you?
I'm a little on the fence about this one. I think watching it for the first time in a very long time, as I did for this show, the mystery element played well. There was intrigue there. But I also felt like, well, we kind of know that this Kodos Caridian guy is the guy we're looking for right from the beginning. As soon as they kill Tom Layton, you just have to assume that these are bad people. There's a little twist with Lenore, but I feel like once you've seen the mystery, there's not a whole lot of replay value for me here. But I think that it is acted well for the most part. For the most part, gets a little over the top when we have that death scene at the end. You know, we're showing you, we're telling you, telegraphing that Lenore is going crazy at this point. You know, so things like that don't entirely play well. I think Shatner's acting is really good. I think the interplay between him and Bones and Spock is very good. I like that they're there challenging him on what he's doing when we get those moments. I think that's terrific stuff. You know, I won't beat this over the head about Lenore being 19 years old, but the seduction scene is still a little 20th century. Little cheesy. And speaking of cheese, how about that cocktail party when they're playing the light jazz version of the Star Trek theme? Yeah.
So it's kind of fun. Although I was honestly distracted. I think those were Balok's Tranya glasses.
Oh, I think they were. Yeah, you're right.
That they were serving the cocktails. Yeah.
But I'm kind of amused by that when shows will include in universe something that is from the production side of the show, like their own theme song. You know, James Bond gets away with that every now and then. Well, arguably they get away with it, like Bond and Moonraker typing in the code to get into the secret lab, and it's the theme from Close Encounters. And every now and then you'll hear hints, like in Octopussy, you hear the James Bond theme being played on the pipes. So every now and then you can kind of sort of squeeze that in as a joke. And for this, I kept thinking, you know, I wanted Kirk to say, hey, you hear that? That's my theme song. You know?
Played in an elevator.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm a little on the fence with this one. I think that it holds up a little bit. I think that there's a lot about it that's solid, but to me there's not replay value, and it is over the top. So I'm still going to sit firmly here on the fence and say, does it hold up? Well, yes and no.
Yeah, the drag is I kind of have to say yes and no as well. I mean, I think this episode might be better if we put it into its historical context, like I talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The events of Tarsus, you know, happened 20 years ago in universe. In real life, this episode aired 21 years after the end of World War II. So the idea that Kirk could be going along minding his own business and stumble across a war criminal might have been resonant to the public at large when this episode aired. So for that, I find it interesting. At the same time, the episode suffers from a lack of, being able to predict the future. Because the idea that only 9 people could ID Kodos is insane today. Kodos' speech would be on the 23rd century equivalent of YouTube. Minutes after it happened, and it might even be streamed on one of the many live streaming services out there, Justin TV or Ustream or whatever you people in the future listening to this historical record are using for streaming live events.
Right.
So it kind of suffers from that. I mean, there would be more than 2 pictures of Kodos. I'm also not sure how he was able to be governor and yet only 9 people could identify him.
Yeah,
because
sure.
We know 4,000 people lived.
Yeah.
Did 3,993 of them crash in the shuttle that was leaving Tarsus 4? So there are a few logical things where it sort of suffers that way, but one of the biggest is even in 1966, even when you're talking about starships and teleporters and all that stuff. I mean, we couldn't possibly know the level to which our lives would be recorded, edited, and then broadcast to everyone. Even if all we're showing is videos of our funny cat.
Right.
So I mean, it kind of suffers from that, but historically it sort of works. And if you like a good episode of Columbo, this is not a bad episode of Columbo.
Mm-hmm.
Or name your favorite sort of mystery show or private investigator show, because Spock sort of takes that role pretty well.
Yeah.
What's the message? Is there one?
Well, see, you just said it in your last sentence, which is that this is a pretty good mystery show. And to me, that's really what this is about. The message isn't necessarily the message. It's just that we're kind of along for this mystery, and we have this Shakespearean grandeur all around us. So we're kind of going along here with Kirk's choices. Do we understand and forgive, or do we pursue justice, and then at what cost? I think there may be a good message here about not jumping to conclusions, and like you say, Ken, making sure that we act the way that we say that we are. We're maintaining this humane system of justice. Kirk says over and over again, he has to make absolutely sure before he does anything. Yeah. And remember how I said earlier that this show isn't about the death penalty, but it made me kind of think of that. Mm-hmm. Because I kept thinking, this is why we have this system in place, is so that when something terrible happens, we don't let our emotions rule the day and have a lynch mob. This is why we go through the correct process of making sure that we have the evidence, we have the factual information. So, is there a message there beyond kind of what I hope we all understand anyway? Maybe not. I think these are important things. I think these are important points that we all should hold dear. And if again we go back to this idea of acting like the better people that we say that we are, well, here's another reminder. Yeah,
this is sort of, this is like, I don't want to say this is humanity at its best, the way the Corbomite maneuver was, because it's certainly not. But this is just a good story set, or a decent story set in the 23rd century. And so mostly what we have is the 23rd century actually being a fairly decent place. Mm-hmm. There's not like a message. This is not, Save the Whales, because they're going to do a whole movie about that. And this is not, this isn't really about, it's not really even a story about justice exactly. It's something that happens. And the cool thing is, from the things that happen, we do get a lot to sort of examine and to look at and to consider. But we haven't used this phrase in the past few weeks. This is not a you see, Timmy. This is not a, and the moral of the story is, it's just, kind of an interesting examination of some interesting ideas, maybe a little too dated to really resonate today the way it might have resonated when it first aired. But, no, the messages that you can pull out, I think you can say that those messages do stand the test of time. The problem is you have to work fairly hard to find, like a stated message. So
yeah,
it feels like, it holds up if you go ahead and apply messages to it. otherwise you may just be in for, an interesting detective show.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Oh, I love when that happens. All right. So that's what we thought, but we do, of course, want to hear what you thought about this show, about shows upcoming, about, other things Star Trekian. I don't know if that's a term, but by God, it should be. There are a number of ways to get in touch with us, and we would love it if you did. You can email us, missionlog@roddenberry.com. Missionlog@roddenberry.com is that email address. You can, of course, hit us up on Twitter @missionlogpod. @missionlogpod will do that. Missionlogpod is also our handle on Skype, or you can pick up the phone and call, just like your great-great-grandparents did. 323-522-5641 is the phone number. 323-522-5641. There is a Facebook page, facebook.com/missionlogpod. And, of course, there is a website, missionlogpodcast.com. And if you seriously can't get in touch with us one of those many ways, I just don't think you're trying hard enough.
All right, everybody, next week, it's time to meet the Romulans. No, that's not a new sitcom. It is rather a balance of terror.
Some of the music for the Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Good night, good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say good night till it be another edition of Mission Log. End transmission.
Now leaving Nerdist.com.